यस, मेरी स्क्रीन दिख रही है सबको? Okay. So in the last lecture, we have talked about the design issues. Okay. In the design issues, we have talked about mainly the four important issues while designing the model. Okay. So in that, we have talked about the issues like entity versus attributes. Okay. So with some example, I have explained you. The second one is entity versus relational sets. Okay. Then we have also talked about the placement of relationship attribute. Okay. And the fourth one is binary versus an array relationship, or you can say binary versus non-binary relationship. Okay. So in this four issues, if the question is asked, you have to explain with an example. Example is very important. Whenever in the DBMS, all the time your example you have to explain with an example. Okay, don't forget that if you are writing down just a theoretical explanation without giving an example, that will not fetch you full marks. Always there has to be an example. Okay, so every issue I have explained you with an example. So these are the four important issues. Now after that we will be moving to the next topic, and that topic is also important. So I think today our lecture will be I will try to complete that topic within this today's lecture, so that in a single go you will be able to understand this concept, because today we'll be talking about chords rule. Today we'll be talking about chords rule, and there are total 13 rules are there. There are total 13 rules. So we will see what is a chords rule and what are these 13 rules. Okay. So you can just write down the heading chords rule. The spelling is CODDS. CODD apostrophe of S. Chords rule. Chords rule. Okay. This is sometimes called as chords 12 rules. Chords 12 rules. Okay. I have told you that there are total 13 rules. Now you will ask me, sir, but it is written as COTS 12 rules. So these rules are nothing but these rules will start from 0 to 12. So there are total 13 rules. Are there. Okay. So because of this last rule as 12, so it is called as a COTS 12 rules. Okay. So COTS is the inventor of this rule. That's why these rules are named after his name. Okay, he was a scientist, and he has given us the rule. Now what these rules says, and why these rules are important in our DBMS subject, so we will see this. Okay, we will see this. Okay, so these are the names, different names: COTS rule, COTS 12 rules. Actually it is 0 to 12 rules, so there are 13 rules are there. Okay, now these rules, 12, 13 rules are there. So these rules will speak about something. But before we start with the explanation of individual rules, these chords rules, we have to understand the introduction of this, or we have to understand what these rules are. Okay. Now when you talk about now we have already studied relational model. We have already studied about the relational model. Okay. Can any of you just tell me in briefly relational model, the structure of the relational model, or what does it contains? Relational model, what does it contain? I just want a holistic idea, or just to know this relational model contains what, or it comprises of what. Yes, very good. It consists of attributes and rows, and these attributes and rows are present in the rows and columns to form a table. Am I right? To form a table, and the name is given to the table. The name is given to the table. Okay. So if, let me give an example of this particular table. Okay, the name of the table is suppose students, and see the different attributes. There are three columns, so I have three attributes. Suppose the first attribute is roll number, the second one is name, and the third is contact number. The third one is contact number. Okay, so there are three attributes, and suppose there are three columns. Okay, so roll number 1, roll number 2, and roll number 3. So student name is A, roll number 2, student's name is B, and then C, and some contact number, contact number. Okay, so this is a relational model. This relational model will have a name of the table with the name as student. It will have some attributes and it will have some rows. We have talked about this thing in detail. I mean to say that what do you mean by domains, what do you mean by to uh, what do you mean by cells, what do you mean by tuple. Okay, if you remember this already, I have explained you tuple, cell, domains. Okay, so these all are related with the relational model. So the court's rule says that if any DBMS, database management system, if any DBMS system or DBMS system wants to, if any DBMS system wants to qualify to become RDBMS, if any DBMS system wants to qualify to become relational database management system, then those DBMS should follow these 12 rules, should satisfy these 12 rules, so that the DBMS should be called as RDBMS. Okay, so here it talks about the relational model, and if any database wants to qualify to become a relational database management system, then those database should follow these 13 rules, should follow these 13 rules, or should satisfy these 30 rules. Now it's difficult to for any database to follow to satisfy all these 13 rules. There is no any model available which follows all these 13 rules. Okay, but there are few models which have at least reached to 8 to 9 rules. Okay, 8 to 9 rules. So there is no model which satisfy to be called as a relational database which will follow all these 13 rules. Okay, you can just write down one sentence in this. All of you please write down. Now from today's onwards, I will be giving you something in writing also. You should write down along while I dictate. Okay, so there will be dictation for every lecture. So write down. Am I audible to everyone? Okay, so please write down. This rule actually define. This rule actually define. You have written the heading as this: COTS rule, COTS 12 rules. In bracket, you can mention 0 to 12, that total 13 rules. Okay, so please write down. This rule actually define. This rule actually define what quality a DBMS. This rule actually defines what quality a DBMS requires, what quality a DBMS requires in order to become a relational database management system, in bracket RDBMS. Again, I'm repeating, this rule actually define what quality a DBMS requires in order to become a relational database management system, RDBMS. You must be knowing that you do not have any lab for this subject. You have only term work. Your term work will be also considered by checking your registers जो आप लिख रहे हो. Okay, so if you are planning that if you are just planning that you will write down something and you will not show me, so that thing will not happen. I will be seeing your registers. Okay, so it's better you write down. So write down one more sentence. To test DBMS concept, to test DBMS concept against the relational model, to test DBMS concept against the relational model, Court's rule are used. Court's rules are used. Court's rules are used. यहां तक लिखा सबने? यहां तक लिखा सबने?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Write down number one, or you do not write down number one. Just write down rule zero. Just write down rule zero. नंबर वन लिखोगे आप, बाद में रूल जीरो लिखोगे तो देयर विल बी कंफ्यूजन. इट्स बेटर you just write down rule 0, which says that this is the first rule, rule 0. This name of the rule is, you can write down in the bracket, foundation rule. Foundation rule. Rule 0 is foundation rule. I'm not explaining you this with a PPT, but it's better you understand with this board. While writing down, I will be explaining you so that it will be clearly understood, properly understood. Okay. So rule 0 is called as a foundation rule. Sometimes it is also called as base rule. Sometimes it is called as base rule. Now, why it is called as a base rule or why it is called as a foundation rule? The only reason, the other rules are derived from this rule 0. Other remaining 12 rules are derived from this rule 0. That is why this rule is called as a foundation. Okay. So if the if you are no if you may have a doubt this why it is called as a foundation rule, this rule is nowhere related with the foundation, but the name is only given because the remaining rules are derived from this rule 0. That is why the name is foundation rule or the base rule. Okay. So what is this rule? So first write down the sentence, then I will give an explanation for this. Write down. This rule states that for a system, I want everyone to write down fast because we have to complete all 13 rules in today's lecture. This rule states that for a system to qualify as an RDBMS, this rule states that for a system to qualify as an RDBMS, comma, it must be able to manage, it must be able to manage, it must be able to manage database, it must be able to manage database entirely through the relational capabilities. This rule states that for a system to qualify as an RDBMS, it must be able to manage database entirely through the relational capabilities. Relational capabilities. If you have written, please let me know. It must be able to manage database entirely through the relational capabilities. Yes, everyone has written?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now see this rule. What this rule says? Now this rule says that if any database is in the form of relational capabilities, relational capabilities already I have explained you. Relational capabilities means it should have a table, it should have an attribute, it should have a column, it should have a row, and as well as it should have the cell. It should have the cell. Now what do you mean by cell? The point where your column and your row intersects, so this becomes the cell. This becomes the cell. This becomes the cell. This becomes the cell. This becomes the cell, and this becomes the cell. Okay. So for any system to qualify as an RDBMS, it must be able to manage. Yes, managing the database is important. Okay, what do you mean by managing the database? Managing the database means should be able to manipulate the data, you should be able to delete the data, you should be able to add the data, you should be able to have a query about the data, you should be able to have the query about the data. Okay, so everything should be the user should be able to manage the database, but through the relational capabilities. So relational capabilities consists of your attributes, your tuples, the rows and columns, and the cell or the domain. Okay, so every model should be in the form of this, then only it will be called as RDBMS. This is rule number one. This is rule number one. Is it clear to everyone? Rule number zero. Is it clear to everyone? Rule number zero.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is rule number zero. Very simple. It should be in the form of a relational model, or it should be form of a table, and the system should be it must be able to manage your database. Management means manipulation, addition, subtraction. You should have queries. Okay, okay. So all this should be able to be managed properly with the rational relational capabilities. That is the meaning. Okay, rule number one. Rule number one, name of this rule number one is information rule. Rule number one is information rule. Please write down on this. I'll be giving you just hardly one or two sentences on every rule, so that you will be able to understand in a proper way. Write down rule number one, that is called as information rule. Write down all information, all information, ब्रैकेट में लिखो इंक्लूडिंग मेटा डेटा, इंक्लूडिंग मेटा डेटा, इंक्लूडिंग मेटा डेटा, ब्रैकेट क्लोज. तो ब्रैकेट में आपने क्या लिखा? इंक्लूडिंग मेटा डेटा. ओके, सो ऑल इंफॉर्मेशन, ब्रैकेट में आपने लिखा इंक्लूडिंग मेटा डेटा इज टू बी रिप्रेजेंटेड एज, is to be represented as stored data, stored data in cells of tables, as stored data in cells of tables, in cells of tables, full stop. The rows and columns have to be strictly, the rows and columns have to be strictly, the rows and columns have to be strictly unordered, unordered, unordered. So information rule, information. So information means what? The information you talk about, that whatever the data you will be giving, whatever the data you will be giving, that should be in the form of stored data, that should be in the form of cells. Every cell should have the information. So if there are three rows are there, every cell should have the data. Every cell should have the data. Okay, so this is your attribute, and these are the cells. So total you have 1 2 3 4, 4 threes are 12, total 12 cells are there, and information should be stored in every cell. Information is important. You have also written their metadata. You have also written their metadata. So this metadata is nothing but data about data. Metadata is nothing but data about data. Okay, so let me give an example. Suppose you are writing down the student is a table. Okay, student is a table. You have the attributes, suppose address. Okay, now address is an attribute. See the last attribute, last attribute is pin code. Now can I say this pin code is nothing but metadata? Pin code, actually when you give the address, there has to be a pin code. Okay, in this address you can write down the pin code, but you have a separate attribute that is called as a pin code. So this is called as a metadata, data about data, data about the data. Okay, so that is called as data on the or more information about the same data, that thing you can say. Okay, so this is called as metadata. Now when you talk about this second rule, first rule, sorry, not first rule, rule number one, you will not say first rule, second rule, third rule, you will say rule 0, rule 1, rule 2 and rule 3. So rule 1 is only says about the information, it only says about the information, that the information should be available on every cell, on every cell. Okay, अभी ये rule 1 will be all I will come back to this rule 1 while explaining you the other rules. Okay, because there is one concept which is called as null. Okay, तो ये जब null concept में पढ़ाऊंगा, then I will come back to rule number 1. Okay, so this is all about your rule number 1. Next we will go to rule 2. Write down rule 2. Rule 2 is called as, the name of the rule is guaranteed access. This is very important. Guaranteed, guaranteed access, guaranteed access, guaranteed access. Write down sentence on this. Each unique piece of data, each unique piece of data, each unique piece of data, ब्रैकेट में लिखो atomic value, ब्रैकेट में लिखो atomic value, each unique piece of data, ब्रैकेट में लिखो atomic value, ब्रैकेट close, should be accessible by, should be accessible by, should be accessible by, write down in this manner, table name plus primary key plus attribute, plus attribute. Okay, so what you have written, each unique piece of data in bracket atomic value, bracket close, should be accessible by table name plus primary key plus attribute, plus attribute. Now this primary key is nothing but your row and your attribute is nothing but column. Your attribute is nothing but column. Okay, so try to understand the concept of this guaranteed access, guaranteed access. So let me give an example. With the example it will be properly understood. Let us take this example where I have shown you this table. Students, the name of the table is student or students. There are three attributes: roll number, name and contact number. Okay, and there are three rows, there are three rows: roll number 1, roll number 2, roll number 3. If I ask you, tell me the primary key, tell me the primary key, which is the primary key, tell me the primary key.
Roll number.
Roll number, yes. So your primary key is roll number. Tell me the name of the table, tell me.
Students.
Students, students. Okay, now see here, what now, suppose I want to take the student whose roll number is 3 from this table. I want to take the student with the roll number of 3. So I will put a, I will put up a query now. हम जब SQL पढ़ेंगे ना, that time you will be able to understand the query. So query is nothing but with some logic you will be able to sort out the data. तो मेरा query ये है कि I want the student with the roll number 3. A simple query is there. I want the student with the roll number as 3. So can I put this in a way, can I put this in a way, can I put this in a way that I want to select, I want to select, okay. Now see here what I'm writing. I want to select, हमने यहाँ पे क्या लिखा था, name, okay. I want to select name from students where where roll number is equals to 3, where roll number is equals to 3. Now if you see carefully in this query, if I ask you to find out table name, so in this you will say students is the table name. Then if I ask you to find the primary key, then you will say the primary key here is roll number. And then if I ask you to find out or identify the attribute, you will say the name, you will say the name. So in this query, if you see carefully, I am having, I am getting the access of the data which I want. I am getting the access of the data which I want through this query. This query says what? Select the name from the students where roll number is equals to 3. So can I say in this query, I am using the table name, I am using the table name plus I am using the primary key plus I am using the attribute. I am using the attribute. So using this query where you use use the table name, primary key and attribute, then it is called as a guaranteed access. So if any of the model contains the table name, primary key and the attribute, then there is a guaranteed access of that data. Then there is a guaranteed access of that data. Okay. So any model to qualify for RDBMS, it should have the table name with the primary key with the and the attribute to have a guaranteed access of the data. To have a guaranteed access of the data. I hope you have understood rule number 2. Any question for rule number 2? Any question for rule number 2?
No, sir.
Okay. Now rule number 3. Rule 3. Rule 3. रूल 3 को बोलते हैं सिस्टमैटिक ट्रीटमेंट ऑफ नल. यस, आई वॉज टॉकिंग अबाउट द नल, सो इट इज सिस्टमैटिक treatment of null. Systematic treatment of null. Write down sentence on this. Here null defines, write down. Here null defines missing data, comma, no value, comma, not applicable. Here null implies missing data, no value, not applicable. Full stop. Null value must be independent of data type. Null value must be independent of data type. Null value must be independent of data type. Now all of you pay attention, this is important. So what do you mean by null? Now sometimes if it may happen that in the rows and columns, if there is one cell and in that cell you have written null. Now here in this case null doesn't implies the value is 0. But here null implies that the data is missing or it is not applicable or it may be happen that there is no value. There is no value. Okay, for example, if you are taking the contact number, and for roll number 4 you do not have the contact number, you will not write down there 0, you will say null. You will say null. You will say, you will say null, you will write down their null. That means the data is not available at present but can be available in future, but for time being you will write down their null. Okay, so when you talk about this null, ओके मैंने जैसा क्या बताया था रूल नंबर 1 में, इंफॉर्मेशन रूल में क्या बताया था, तो एवरी सेल शुड हैव द डेटा. नाउ हियर इफ आई एम पुटिंग द डेटा null, it doesn't mean there is a zero value. It only means the data is missing, or it is no value, or it is not applicable. So if any data model, if I'm using with a zero, with a value of 0, that will be not qualified as a rdbms. You should write down their null. So null has the significance. null has the significance. Okay, and this value must be independent of the data type. The data type means you take any data type, it may be string, it may be integer, it may be whole number, it may be anything. For any data type you can put the null, because your null value is always independent of the data type. ऐसे नहीं बोल सकते कि नल हम इसके लिए लिख सकते हैं उसके लिए नहीं लिख सकते. नो, दैट थिंग इज नॉट पॉसिबल. Okay, so whenever you are using this null in the table, and there is no missing or if there is a missing value, you should have the value as, you should put the value as null. That is the meaning of rule 3. Systematic treatment of null. You should treat this null as in a systematic manner. So systematic treatment of null. Is it clear to everyone? Rule number 3. Is it clear to everyone? Rule number 3.
Yes, sir.
Now comes rule number 4. Rule number 4 is active online catalog. Write down. Active online catalog. Active online catalog. Active online catalog. Write down. Database dictionary, ब्रैकेट में लिखो कैटलॉग. Database dictionary, ब्रैकेट में लिखो कैटलॉग, is the structure description of the database dictionary catalog is the structure description of the complete database complete database, and it must be stored online, and it must be stored online, and it must be stored online, full stop. The catalog must be governed by same rules. The catalog must be governed by same rules as rest of the database. As rest of the database. As rest of the database. Full stop. The same query language should be used on catalog as used to query database. The same query language should be used on catalog as used to query database. I am repeating the sentence what you have written. Database dictionary, bracket में लिखा है catalog, is the structured description of the complete database, and it must be stored online. The catalog must be governed by same rules as rest of the database. Full stop. The same query language should be used on catalog as used to query database. Now see here, this is important. Now catalog means what? Catalog, आप कभी जाते हो, suppose you want to uh, yes, if you want to paint your house, okay, you need to select the color. Okay, if you are buying, if you want to paint your house, then you go to the shop and you ask for the catalog. The catalog will have different shades, different colors with different shades. So similarly the catalog is applicable here. Here when you talk about the catalog, this catalog is nothing but the online dictionary. It is the online dictionary. It is an online dictionary. Now what is this dictionary contains? This contains the information about the table. How many tables are there, how many rows are there, what are the attributes taken, how they are related with each other, everything will be present in the catalog. Everything will be present in the catalog. Okay, and this catalog is also stored online. As you are storing the table in the database, your catalog, that is the online dictionary, is also stored online, must be stored online, that is the meaning. Okay, and your catalog should be governed by the same rule as rest of the database. आप जैसे database को govern करते हो with some rules, in the same way your catalog should be also governed. It also means that if you are putting some queries, अब जैसे मैंने एग्जांपल दिया था क्वेरी का, मुझे चाहिए वो स्टूडेंट जिसका रोल नंबर 3 है, मुझे चाहिए वो स्टूडेंट जिसका कॉन्टैक्ट नंबर ये है. ओके, just hold on, please hold on for a minute. हेलो. हाँ मिदिल. हेलो. 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 अरे जूनियर कॉलेज कर दिया मैं. अरे बाबा उधर कैसे गया तू? अरे उधर आ गए, ये मैप में डाला था मैंने, देखा नहीं. अरे तो मैप डालना था ना, मेरे को लगा तो रास्ता पता है. हाँ मैंने डाला, मैप पे जूनियर पहुंच गया. कौन सा डालोगे मैप में? अरे बाप रे. अब जूनियर कॉलेज से इधर इंजीनियरिंग कॉलेज तुमको नहीं जमेगा अभी. अभी इंजीनियरिंग कॉलेज देखा नहीं रहा. वहां पे किसी को पूछ इंजीनियरिंग कॉलेज जाने के लिए रास्ता किधर से. ठीक है. अरे तू उधर का को चला गया. हाँ यार वो डाला मैंने और चला चला के चलाते चलाते. अरे भैया, भैया इंजीनियरिंग कॉलेज. हाँ इंजीनियरिंग. सीधा जाने के राइट. हेलो. हाँ क्या बोल रहा हूँ, घूम के जा बोल रहा हूँ. सीधा जाके राइट बोल रहा है. हाँ क्या. मस्जिद सीधा. हाँ. हाँ. तूने कॉलेज नहीं डाला था क्या, इंजीनियरिंग कॉलेज? हाँ अभी डालता हूँ. इंजीनियरिंग कॉलेज दिखा नहीं रहा, मैं पैसे जूनियर कॉलेज दिखाया. यार किसी को पूछ, कलेक्टर कॉलोनी इंजीनियरिंग कॉलेज, कलेक्टर कॉलोनी में इंजीनियरिंग कॉलेज है. कलेक्टर कॉलोनी. हाँ. हाँ. Yes. So, yes, I was talking about the query. So, whenever you are putting some query to access your data in your database, in the same way, you should also put up the query if you want to see some, information in the catalog. That is the meaning. So, if any database which follows this particular rule, then it qualifies to be called as a RDBMS. That is the meaning. So, Rule 4 says active online catalog. So every database should have an active online catalog. That is the meaning for rule 4. Is it clear to everyone? Rule number 4? Yes? Yes, sir. Yes, now comes to rule number 5. The rule number 5 is powerful and well structured language. This is also very important. Powerful and well structured language. Powerful and well structured language. Powerful and well structured language. Write down. One well structured language must be one well structured language must be one well structured language must be there to provide all manners of access, must be there to provide all manners of access to the data, all manners of access to the data stored in the database, stored in the database. Example, write down the example. Example is SQL, structured query language. हम जब भी कुछ क्वेरी करते हैं ना डेटाबेस को, वो हम करते हैं थ्रू एसक्यूएल लैंग्वेज. एंड योर ओरेकल has the access of this SQL. Okay, your Oracle has this SQL. So what is SQL? structured query language. Structured query language. Structured query language. Okay. So you have written the example of SQL. Now try to understand what is this powerful and well structured language. Now when you talk about this any database, okay, so this database should have its own structure language. This is very important. हर एक database का खुद का structure language होना चाहिए. क्यों होना चाहिए? To have the access of the data stored in the database. आपको पता है आपके फिजिकल लेवल वहाँ पे आपका डेटाबेस होता है. So if I want to remove any data through some query, so any database, every database should have its own language. And which language? That is called as a structured language. कौन सा लैंग्वेज होना चाहिए? स्ट्रक्चर्ड लैंग्वेज होना चाहिए. और क्या एग्जाम्पल है एसक्यूएल, स्ट्रक्चर क्वेरी लैंग्वेज. ये कहाँ पे यूज होता है? कौन यूज करता है? ओरेकल यूज करता है. ओके. सो पावरफुल एंड वेल स्ट्रक्चर्ड लैंग्वेज अगर किसी भी डेटाबेस के पास है, देन इट क्वालिफाइज टू बी कॉल्ड एज ए RDBMS. Then it is qualified to call as a RDBMS. Okay. यहाँ पे और एक important बात है. Write down note लिखो. Write down the note. If the database allows access to the data, please write down the note. If the database allows the access of the data without the use of this language, अगर हम एक्सेस कर रहे हैं डेटा का बट विदाउट द क्वेरी, दिस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. मैं डेटाबेस में जा रहा हूं टू एक्सेस द डेटा बट विदाउट द क्वेरी, इट मीन्स विदाउट द structured language, then it is the violation. Then it is the violation. तो आपने क्या लिखा नोट में? आपने लिखा if the database allows the access to the database to the data without the use of the language, without the use of this language, then that is the violation. 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 So I hope you have understood rule number 5. Shall we proceed further? Shall we proceed further?
Yes.
Rule 6. Write down rule 6. Rule 6 is view updation rule. View updation rule. Rule number 6 is view updation rule. Write down all the view that are theoretically updatable, all the view that are theoretically updatable should be updatable by the system as well. Should be updatable by the system as well. Should be updatable by the system as well. Yes, this is also important. See the meaning of this. You have studied the hierarchy. You have the users at the view level. ये हमने पढ़ा है. You have the users at the view level. Then comes the logical level, and then comes the physical level. Then comes the physical level. And in the physical level, you have database. So whatever the updation is happening in the view level, whatever the updation is having in the view level, that should be automatically updated by the system, and that should be reflected in the database. That is the meaning of the rule 6. As simple as it is. View updation rule. So anything which is updated at the theoretical level, at the view level, should be automatically updated by the system in the database. Can I say this is nothing but auto updation? ऑटो अपडेशन, या फिर हम बोल सकते हैं सेल्फ अपडेशन, खुद के खुद ही करता है वो। व्यू में थ्योरेटिकली अपडेट करो, ऑटोमेटिकली जाके वो डेटाबेस में अपडेट करता है। व्यू में कुछ अपडेट करो, ऑटोमेटिकली जाके वो डेटाबेस में अपडेट करता है। दैट इज नथिंग बट ऑटोमेटिक अपडेशन, या फिर हम उसको बोल सकते हैं सेल्फ अपडेशन। सो रूल 6 इज इंपॉर्टेंट, व्यू अपडेशन रूल। Okay, and if any database follows this rule 6, qualifies to be called as RDBMS. Is it clear to everyone? Rule 6, is it clear to everyone? Rule 6. Okay, then comes rule 7. Write down the rule 7 now. Rule 7 is called as relational level operation. Relational level operation. Relational level operation. Relational level operation. Okay, now what is this relational level operation? Write down. There must be there must be insert, comma, delete, comma, update operation at each level of relations. At each level of relations, again I'm saying, there must be insert, comma, delete, comma, update operations at each level of relations, full stop. Set operation like union, comma, intersection, and minus should also be supported. Should also be supported. Set operation like union, intersection, and minus should also be supported, which is done by, in the same sentence, continue without full stop, with the help of relational algebra. With the help of relational algebra. With the help of relational algebra. It means what? वही बात मैंने आपको पहले बताया था कि you have a view level, you have a logical level, you have a physical level. So if I am doing any sort of manipulation, if I am inserting something, if I am deleting something, if I am updating something, or if I am doing any of the operation, that should be able to done at each level of relational, at each level of relations. व्यू लेवल पे आप कर सकते हो, लॉजिकल लेवल पे भी हो सकता है, फिजिकल लेवल पे भी हो सकता है। ओके, एंड द डेटाबेस should support this particular type of operation, like union, intersection, and minus. Now actually union, intersection, and minus, these are called as a relational algebra. When we'll be talking about the relational algebra, that time it will be more clear. Okay, just give me acha, I think we can stop for today. It's 2:10. When is your next lecture? When is your next lecture?
after 10.
After 10 minutes. Okay. So we have completed with rule number 7. Okay, we have completed with the rule number 7. Again, I am talking about the rule number 7. It talks about the relational level operation, that whatever the operation you do at any level, okay, that should be permitted by the database. Okay, so that operation can be union, that can be intersection, or that can be a minus. Now these three operations are related with the relational algebra. Okay, in short you can say insertion, deletion, and the updation. In short you can say insertion, deletion, and updation. That is what you have written. So if that is possible at every level of the relationship or relation, then it qualifies to be called as RDBMS. So we have talked about the 7, the remaining 5, the remaining 5 rules we will see in the next lecture. Okay, any question? Any question you have?
No, sir.
Okay. ईशा अटेंडेंस हुआ कि एक बार चेक करो. प्रियंका मैम आई थी?